the United States, there are currently 34 states and territories that have HIV-specific criminal laws. Sentences for these crimes have reached as high as 70 years in prison. Some states also require violators to register as convicted sex offenders, alongside child molesters and rapists. Consequently, offenders are left with severe limitations with respect to employment, housing, and in some cases, even voting rights.
My reality is that I too was involved in a relationship with someone, and the relationship ended, and they pressed charges against me for not disclosing my HIV status.
Being HIV positive, it's not easy. It's not easy. I never did thought I was a monster. I never did thought I was out there to harm anyone. All I thought is I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted, just like any normal person, any human being. So when I got prosecuted, I felt like a monster. I felt like I hurt someone.
I was sentenced to 2 years probation, but then told that I had to register as a sex offender, which was something that was never discussed in my case. And of course, I accepted a plea deal to get it over with, because when you're faced with that, you want it to be over.
We all have sex. I didn't think that sex was a crime.
And I was still going to court just to address that issue. And of course, the court realized that they sentenced me incorrectly, and therefore they told me that I had to register as a sex offender, but that I also had to do prison time. And so I ended up doing 6 months in prison. And as a result, I also had to have sex offender on my driver's license in the state of Louisiana. And you send out community notifications. You send out a lot of postings in the newspaper and to area schools and parks, because I'm a danger to the community, and they have to know that I'm a sex offender.
Why are you listed as a sex offender? My understanding of what a sex offender is usually involves children.
So why did we do that?
Yes.
I don't know. It was part of it. When we wrote this bill in 98, it was part of a sexual offender update or rewrite. And that's why this got tied into the sexual offender. There was an expansion of our registry, and this was going on all across the nation. Sex offender registries all across the nation, and it is probably one of the most unjust aspects of our law.
The stigma that people with HIV live with today is greater than it has ever been. Fear of casual contagion is less. The stigma as reflecting in prejudgment and in marginalization, as Vanessa said, is greater today. And if you ask people with HIV who have lived with it for a long time, including I see heads nodding here in the room, they will concur with that. And I think one of the things that is contributing to that is how we talk about disclosure and what our expectations are around disclosure. For much of the epidemic, disclosure was considered a very personal, private decision. When people were diagnosed, they often were told, don't disclose to anybody for a while until you are prepared to deal with the consequences of disclosure. And the consequences of disclosure, in many ways, are in fact worse today than they have been before. And so this expectation that everybody should disclose, that it's a necessary, that it's an inherent obligation of people with HIV to go around announcing it. Because when you tell an intimate partner, you're announcing it to anybody they tell it to. You can't keep this a secret between two. So the expectation that we're to be disclosing all the time, I resent. I believe that is wrong. I think that what we should be doing should be creating an environment where we are comfortable disclosing, where it is safe for us to disclose, where we can disclose without fear of violence, without fear of losing our homes or our employment or our social standing or custody of our children. And so talking about the people with HIV and their problems disclosing, that's what's wrong. We need to be talking about how to make it safe for people to disclose who choose to disclose. In terms of talking to people with HIV, as we should talk to everybody, we should be giving them the tools and information so they don't put other people at risk. That may or may not involve disclosure. So the whole focus that disclosure is suddenly the bedrock of HIV prevention today is an enormous mistake. And it is something that has happened incrementally over the last 10 or 12 years that has not really been, I think, reflected upon by even our own AIDS leadership.
Is it my duty not to date someone just so that everyone else stays safe? Even if you are educated like me, but there's that doubt in your mind. Say my first time fully disclosing to a boyfriend was with him, and I was sweating a lot, and it was really, really, really hard. And I just wanted the whole world to swallow me up.
So, I mean, I didn't say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, because nothing you say can change that. You can't reverse that. So the first thing I did was like, all right, just quiet for a couple minutes. Let's continue on just hanging out.
I think we need to think about it as reform of actually, in some ways, as Dave actually said, so you can have guidelines for prosecutors, but that won't bind them. So maybe we need to come up with something that will actually cabin the discretion. And I think Catherine, brought this up earlier, that maybe what we need to actually do is put in place something that will deal with, all sexually transmitted infections and how prosecutors should actually be dealing with these things. Because otherwise you're going to have, and we've seen this already, in states without the HIV-specific laws, there are still prosecutions taking place. And they are still uninformed prosecutions. They're fed by misconceptions and really hysteria around HIV and its transmission. So simply getting rid of the laws, and as I think someone else brought up, they will find another law to prosecute or to act on their prejudices, their preconceived notions, and their idea that somehow people with HIV are a threat. So I do think we need to be thinking more broadly.
There is now a growing initiative to modernize legislation in our country in order to protect the rights and lives of Americans currently living with HIV and AIDS. Alongside reducing the number of new HIV infections, the aim is to have a United States where all will have unfettered access to high-quality, life-extending care, free of stigma and discrimination.
When I talk to people about this issue, like myself, they have no clue. Stand up for law reform because there is the automatic accusation that you are soft on crime. And so I want our country to lead the world. I want us to be that shining light in the world so I can go back to the UN and I can say, look, we did it,